Paul Atreides, the main character of the first books in the Dune saga. It is through his eyes that we perceive this story, and thus, by default, we side with him. Initially, Paul appears as a true hero. He battles the cruel and terrifying villains, the Harkonnens, opposes the cunning emperor, and seeks to avenge his innocently murdered father. However, the deeper you delve into the plot, the more ambiguous this character becomes. His decisions start to seem illogical, and he turns out to be even more ruthless than his predecessors. Indeed, the author of Dune has thoroughly described Paul's motives, but many readers of my channel question these motives in the comments, suggesting they are merely excuses for Paul's dictatorial tendencies. It's often hard to disagree with them. When his son, Leto II, came to power, things got even worse for many citizens of the Empire. It's not surprising that many started to consider the Atreides dynasty the main evil in human history. Those who think so have very reasonable arguments. Let's explore these arguments in this video and ponder together who Paul and Leto II really were. Tyrants or saviors? We're accustomed to true heroes fighting against evil for the common good and justice, helping others. However, Paul Atreides began his struggle purely for personal reasons. The Harkonnens and Emperor Shaddam IV conspired and killed his father, intending to overthrow House Atreides, miraculously surviving. Paul decided to retaliate against his foes and do to them what they intended to do to him. For this purpose, Paul ingratiated himself with the Fremen, cynically playing on their beliefs and myths, presenting himself as the prophesied Messiah, possessing knowledge and skills beyond the local natives. He essentially portrayed himself as a deity incarnate. As a result, he managed to lead the Fremen, unite the scattered tribes into a massive army, and at the cost of their lives, take revenge on the Harkonnens and Emperor Shaddam. However, after this, Paul Atreides did not settle down and return to a peaceful life in the desert. He seized power in the Empire and punished all dissenters. Thus began his reign. The Fremen, who believed in Paul as their Messiah and brought him to power, became a formidable force in the Empire. They looked at other worlds and decided that everyone should worship Paul Atreides, muad'dib. Aggressive preachers soon emerged, who began to spread this faith and forced everyone to worship Paul. Yes, the emperor did not particularly encourage this cult, but he did not completely ban it either, allowing his followers to do what they wanted, glorifying his name. Moreover, he appointed his own sister, Alia, as the head of this cult, further strengthening its influence in the empire. This was not surprising. The Fremen's forces were still necessary for Paul. When Paul seized power, most forces in the empire were forced to recognize him as the new emperor. However, there were many dissenters in the state, those who were not quick to submit to the Atreides and accept the new rules or simply worship Paul as the supreme being. All these worlds became prey to the legions of Fremen, who invaded them with the name of muad'dib on their lips, bringing fire and destruction. For the Fremen, this was a massive revenge that they gave to the world, having languished in the desert for millennia. The Fremen participating in this war eventually received wealth, estates, spacious homes in the capitals of various planets for their merits. Paul Atreides knew how to reward his loyal warriors. The Fremen did not shy away from any methods to deal with the undesirables, including even nuclear weapons. Ultimately, they truly conquered all of humanity, but the cost of this victory was incredibly high. Over 12 years of the muad'dib jihad, the Fremen destroyed over 60 billion inhabitants of the Atreides Empire who dared not recognize Paul's authority. And Paul turned a blind eye to all this, allowing his fervent followers to do whatever they wanted. Thus, the responsibility for all these events fell on him. But Paul, despite all his abilities, remained human and therefore mortal. and humanity had a chance to simply survive his reign. However, after Paul, his son Leto II ascended to the throne, continuing his father's work and turned into a real monster. Leto II possessed the same abilities as Paul, meaning he was also a Kwisatz Haderach, where Paul, still retaining some remnants of humanity deep within, could not go all the way. Leto II saw no barriers and gladly became the galaxy's dictator. Leto II completed the reforms initiated by his father. He completely stripped the Spacing Guild, the Bene Gesserit Order, and the Assembly of Noble Houses, the Landsraad, of their power. Previously, for 10,000 years, these organizations competed with each other and with the Emperor, maintained a balance of power in the Empire, preventing the establishment of a sole dictatorship. However, Leto II broke this order, and through threats, blackmail, and brute force, compelled all other players to fully recognize his authority. The Spacing Guild became dependent on Leto II, who privatized the spice reserves vital to them. The Landsraad could potentially not oppose the legions of Fremen and also lost most of its troops. The Bene Gesserit were exposed and lost their secret influence on the politics of the Empire. No one else could limit or even restrain the Emperor's power, and Leto II became the omnipotent ruler. To remain in power as long as possible and not repeat his father Paul's mistake, Leto decided to discard his human origin and transformed himself into a super being, a huge sandworm with the head and hands of a human. This transformation helped him fully unlock his mental abilities and also made him practically immortal. Leto declared himself the God Emperor of humanity, who would rule forever. Of course, there were dissenters in the Empire. However, Leto II, possessing absolute foresight, knew in advance about any plans of his enemies and prevented conspiracies in their infancy. He dealt with all who secretly or openly opposed him. Thus, the Emperor destroyed the centuries-old school for training mentats. He punished philosophers and thinkers who questioned the justice of his rule. Leto became the all-seeing and all-knowing eye of the Empire, always watching and able to penetrate even the most hidden thoughts of any inhabitant. All this might have been bearable if the Atreides Empire was in effective state, but Leto II intentionally and systematically stalled any development. He significantly reduced interplanetary flights, leaving different planets to fend for themselves and practically not contacting each other. He suppressed the development of scientific thought and banned research. Anything new was practically prohibited. Only technologies approved by the Emperor were allowed. Leto II harshly suppressed all dissenters. Gradually, he distanced the legions of Fremen from power, deliberately turning them from a passionate, fierce people of warriors into ordinary pampered city dwellers. Instead of the Fremen, Leto made women the main military force of the Empire, a special military order called Fish Speakers. They were completely loyal to the Emperor and had no personal ambitions, unconditionally following any orders. Also, Leto had a particular amusement. In his youth, he was raised for a time by a Ghola, clone of Duncan Idaho, a military commander of House Atreides. Duncan so pleased Leto that for thousands of years he constantly ordered him to be cloned anew, then forced the clone to recall his previous life and serve him. Almost all clones eventually came to the conclusion that Leto needed to be overthrown, that he was desecrating the name of House Atreides. Each time, the Emperor suppressed these conspiracies and killed the clones, then ordered a new one to be produced, and so on in a cycle. The Emperor remained in power for a full 3,500 years. Dozens of generations were born and died while he, in the form of a terrifying worm, still sat on his throne. However, over these years, among the descendants of Leto's sister, Ghanima, there emerged individuals with a special gene that made them invisible to the Emperor's prescience. This meant he could not predict their actions. One such individual was Siona Atreides, who united with several conspirators, including yet another clone of Duncan Idaho, and managed to carry out an assassination on the Emperor. He fell into water, which was the only way to kill him since water was deadly to sandworms. Leto II perished, and it turned out that all these millennia he had not cared to leave an heir or even create a robust system that would allow the state to endure. Thus, after the Emperor's death, his vast empire simply collapsed. True chaos ensued. Millions of worlds faced famine and flared up in countless wars. Humanity experienced such upheavals as it had never seen throughout its history. It's no wonder that when the planet Ix invented a new type of spacecraft for long-distance travel, billions of people left the bounds of the Empire to forget it and the Emperor as a terrible nightmare. So if one looks at the history of Paul and Leto II Atreides from the perspective of logic and ordinary imperial citizens, they both turn out to be the greatest evil in human history. Personally, I do not share this view of the characters and adhere to the opinion that the author of the work is the ultimate authority. And if Herbert said that the deeds of Paul and Leto II were a necessary evil for the survival of humanity, then it was so. But you may have a different opinion, and I would be glad if you share it in the comments. And with that, I'm done. If you liked this video, don't forget to rate it, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell. Your activity is the best reward for me. Thank you for your attention. See you soon. Goodbye.